Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good day. Thank you all for joining, whether you're joining Sunday afternoon or anytime throughout the weekday. Thank you all so much for joining. So, today you may see an additional face on the screen. I am joined by Thomas, and here shortly, I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and tell a little bit more about who he is and what he represents and some of his background. So, for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, my name is Lepore Lindsay, and I go live every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Central. And we talk about workplace value. And when we talk about workplace value, what this means is that we are talking about how each individual can bring their value to the workplace. This isn't a question of self worth because every single person has self worth. This is about when we're talking about how do we translate that greatness that we have into the work that we do, into the conversations that we have, into the emails, into the meetings. How do we do that? Specifically today, we are going to be focusing in on leading early. So, whether or not you already have the title and maybe it's early in your career, or maybe you have the official title of leader on your radar as of recently, that's what we're going to be covering in more depths. And so I've already spoken enough, and so I will now turn it over to Lavar to introduce himself and tell you a little bit more. Thank you for joining me today, Lavar.
Yeah, thank you, Lepora. And just want to make sure that you can hear me okay on my end. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever time zone you're in right now. My name is Lavar Thomas. I am founder of Empower for Greatness, where I work with leaders and aspiring leaders and organizations to really tap into their potential, really get beyond the self-limiting beliefs that sometimes get in the way of leaders actually taking action, but also stepping up and showing up and feeling like they deserve to have that title as leader. Really, my background, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. That's where my roots are. My family's from Guyana. And so I bring that Caribbean perspective as well to my work. But really, one of the experiences that have really transformed how I see leadership was through my Peace Corps service, serving in Rwanda, East Africa, really being a community health volunteer on the ground and working with communities in remote and rural areas, particularly around public health. But it was there I really learned grassroots leadership, what it means to acquire the buy-in of a community. Does it look like to address really complex global issues without resources? And how do you show up in those environments? How do you empower people to be a part of those solutions? And so a lot of my leadership perspective comes from one, understanding the needs of others, but how do you empower them to also be a part of the solution? So it's not simply saying I am the leader, I'm coming with the solution, but how are we both working together to address that? So from there, I launched my nonprofit organization called Leaders of the Free World, where we work with young Black men, both in community college and four-year institutions, and we provide international education opportunities. So over the past 9 years, we've been taking young Black men to Ghana, West Africa, where we explore different themes in leadership, provide cross-cultural learning, and really helping them to see themselves beyond their environments. Many of our students have never left the country, and so through these cross-cultural immersion experiences, they're able to see themselves as leaders within their environment and be able to become change agents. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of my backstory, and looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Lavar. So I took notes because there was
yeah,
one particular thing that you mentioned, and I think that it's really important, as I know that our subtopic is about building global leadership
hmm,
opportunities. I know that, so I'm a military spouse, and so I have had the opportunity to work, both stateside and abroad. And given your background with the Peace Corps and how you grew up, and even your college education and the
hmm,
organizations that you have, I feel like we've both experienced a global perspective.
hmm.
With all of that, what have you found to be, or if there are even common themes that go cross culturally? Because I know that that was a phrase that you use, is that cross culturally. Are there common themes cross culturally when it comes to leadership?
Absolutely. I think one of the common themes that I've noticed is just like problem solving. being able to recognize complex issues, and how do you align people around that issue. And I think when it comes to kind of the global perspective, you realize that leadership across boundaries looks different just based on the cultural context. So, for
Right.
example, in Rwanda, while I was serving as a Peace Corps volunteer, working to empower the young women in my community was a prime focus, because when you're dealing with maternal and child health and malnutrition, those issues were quite prevalent in my work. And so for me, it's kind of dis- distorting the narrative that because I'm from America, I bring all these resources. Like there was a perception that, okay, I had all the answers, and
Mhm.
so it was trying to say, no, I don't have all the answers, and even if I did have the answers, it may not necessarily apply in this cultural context, because
Right.
there's unique needs and just difference and nuances. And so I think when it comes to just assessing issues, assessing needs, I think that's pretty common across uh, different cultures. Just being willing and open to say, I don't know, and I need to assess what's going on here for me to be more mindful of what solution I am presenting, so that it doesn't present another challenge, or I'm not stepping on toes or anything like that. And so from a cultural context, I think like that was one of the key things, is recognize, like, being culturally sensitive,
Right.
understanding, okay, what are the things that I should know about in this culture, and what are the needs, what are the challenges, and kind of approaching it that way. And I found that to be common, within leadership.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And actually it brings up a point. So, oh gosh, maybe 7 years, maybe 7, 8 years ago, I was working at a job, and we had a guest speaker, and one of the things that she spoke about was the fact that she does not believe in cultural competence.
Mm,
And the reason why she said that is, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but it was to your point of, we don't have all the answers. And even if we are really good about knowing how to lead in our particular organization or our particular department, when another person comes in, the dynamics change. And we are such complex individuals. Like, there's so many different factors, so many different layers to us, that to say that we're competent essentially says that we know it all. That
mm,
was that was her point to that. And so
mm.
I kind of gather that from what you said, but I don't know if that is something that you agree with, or what do you think about that?
When I think about cultural competency, it's more so having a respect for the culture that you're in.
Yeah.
It's being open to learning and saying, I don't know. Help me to understand what to say, what not to say, how to conduct myself. And that's something that we teach our students as well. That what may work at home may not apply. It doesn't work abroad. And so just being mindful and respectful that, when you're eating in a restaurant, or you're having a conversation, like, don't do this, or give eye contact, or shake hands, or just certain things that change just based on the culture you're in. So I think when we speak about cultural competency, it's just recognizing that, what's the language in this new environment that I need to understand, so I can more appropriately navigate that space.
Yeah. No, I get that. From that I get stay curious. Essentially, like like
Hmm.
how do we stay curious, especially because I know we're talking about leadership, especially when we're looking at being a leader. And I don't know how we got to this point where we feel like leaders should have all the answers. They should be
Hmm.
know-it-alls. Like, and we don't see that as a bad thing. And I feel like a lot of times we even equate, specifically to the word competent, we equate competence to leadership, as in, if someone is leading and they're not competent, as in if they don't know it all, then we're like, oh gosh, they're a terrible leader. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so, or at least that's what I've seen.
absolutely. No, I coach leaders across, the federal government, as part of my role. And it's interesting to see, sometimes we put leaders on this pedestal.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
just based on their title. Oh, deputy director of this, or
Yeah.
executive director of this, and you naturally feel like, wow, they know everything, they don't have any issues, and then you coach them and you're like, wow, like you have the same issues as a common person, like you're struggling
Yeah.
with imposter syndrome. You're dealing with a lot of different challenges. You don't know how to say no, you don't know how to establish boundaries. So a lot of these things, when you start to coach them, like, wow, like, you wouldn't assume that they struggle with these various issues within their leadership, because again, that title kind of allows them to put that mask on for some reason, and
Yeah.
they hide behind the title basically.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. So, just really quick, for those of you who are tuning in, you can let us know where you are tuning in from, or if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to message Lavar later, you can feel free to do that. But now is the time for us to. We're having this conversation. It's an open conversation. So, for any additional insights or input that you have, Lavar, to your point, as far as when you were talking about you're a coach, you coach leaders and you work with them in order to get them to that point.
Hmm.
What does leading before the title, what does that really look like? Especially when no one has asked you to lead, or no one has said, yes, Lapora, you're ready. Lavar, you are ready to lead. How can someone know that they have what it takes to lead?
Great question, Lepore. One of the things one of my mentors told me was, like, LeVar, know who you are before you step into a position.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Know who you are. So that level of self-awareness of understanding who you are, what are your values, what's your why, what drives you, just having that level of insight within yourself and understanding kind of like that emotional intelligence piece of like,
Yeah.
what environments do I need to be a part of to thrive? You know, all those questions, I think we internally know, but
Yeah.
sometimes we second guess it, right? We feel like, I need to receive that permission to lead.
Yeah.
And I've learned that if you have that burning desire within your heart, that's purpose speaking. And so we naturally are attuned to certain things, to certain issues that might drive us to take action. And so I like to listen to a lot of Dr. Miles Monroe. And one of the questions he asks when it comes to purpose is like, what makes you angry,
Oh, okay.
right? What makes you
Yeah.
angry? And so, because usually the thing that makes you angry, it's tied to something within you that you want to address. And right. And so within the workplace, certain things that made me angry was the lack of diversity. Right. And so I naturally wanted to be a part of groups and work groups that help address some of those challenges, look
Yeah.
at the gaps in hiring, where are we falling short in terms of the interview process, and how are we equipping those who are interested in applying to roles, particularly in the federal government, with the insight. How do you design your resume?
Yeah.
What questions you should be asking, how do you follow up, what should your LinkedIn look like, right? And
Yeah.
so again, thinking about what are those things that really make you angry, and feeling like, okay, I'm going to do something about it. Like, I don't need permission to take action.
Yeah.
And so it's just that affirmation, like, do I need permission? Like, you want to understand the landscape of your environment, of your workplace, but if you see something that you can jump in or join a work group or align people around that common thing that you're trying to solve, that's leadership.
Yeah.
And you don't need to have a title to do that or to get started.
Oh, that's good. That's good because I'm hearing something that you mentioned earlier. So I feel like that's the common thread when it
Hmm.
comes to early leadership is that curiosity piece. Because even with the self-awareness, not a lot of people are self-aware. Not a lot of people do have that type of insight that is needed initially. But if they're curious about their own self-awareness, their own growth, their own development, what makes them angry, right, so they can figure out what they're passionate about and what their purpose is, then that's some really good insight there. So we have a question from Annette, and it says, and Lavar, this is for you.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest need for the leaders that you coach?
Um, I think a lot of times they just need space to share their ideas, and without feeling ridiculed or judged. I think a lot of times, that vulnerability is not often like afforded to them, to say, I
Yeah.
don't know, or I'm struggling. I was coaching a client, and they were dealing with kind of diversity and conflict and making certain decisions that was affecting their staff. And so wanting to share ideas, saying, hey, I'm struggling with this aspect. So really having a space where they can be themselves, they can take their cape off and kind of work, like triage some of those problems that they're having and have a sounding board and to be challenged. I think
Yeah.
that's what they're really looking for.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, hopefully, Annette, that answered your question. If you have additional ones, let us know.
Yeah, great question, Annette.
Yes, absolutely. So when we're talking about, early leaders, so individuals who are professionals in the workplace who don't yet have a title,
Mm-hmm.
but they are looking for an opportunity to step into that role. Perhaps that's something that they desire.
Mm-hmm.
What is one of the most overlooked ways that these types of individuals can build influence before they get into an official leadership role? So whether they're
Yeah,
early in their career or maybe they're just early in thinking about, hey, maybe this is something that I want to try.
absolutely. So I think clarity is king, right? And so having that career roadmap of where you're trying to go is really important, because then you're able to kind of hone in on what are some of those skill sets, what are the skill gaps that I need to equip myself with. So
Yeah.
when you know that you want to get into a certain role or a certain space within your companies, okay, what are my existing skills, what's the gap, and where are the opportunities that would allow me to get those experiences, and who within the organization is doing what I aspire to do as well, because that's another shortcut in terms of identifying mentors, identifying sponsors, identifying um, confidants, people who that you can have on your side, that can that you can like triage some of these ideas with and say, hey, like I'm really interested in X. They might tell you, hey, there's this work group that just been formed, or maybe there's an event that's happening where you're going to be able to network with folks in the space that you're trying to get into. And so it's constantly asking questions, it's putting yourself out there. Um, it's understanding where the environments that's going to allow you to build those skills that you're trying to develop to get you to that next space. Are there
Yeah.
projects that you could start creating? But really, just identifying what are the, meet with your supervisor and say, hey, where are the current gaps in the organization? How can you fill that gap? And usually, that would then allow you to start building that influence.
No, that's good. Because and what I'm getting from this is like the communication piece. Like it's so obvious, but it's so overlooked. Like
Mm-hmm.
the ability to ask a question, the ability to use our peers and to use them as sounding boards and to also use them as the teammates that they are, because no one gets to leadership by themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
it takes multiple aspects. And I feel, to add to what I've gathered with what you said, is I feel like when it comes to influencing and individuals who are professionals or not yet in a leadership role officially, they may still lead, but they're not in that role officially, but they're trying to get there, is a lot of times there's so much focus too on influencing upward. So
Mm-hmm.
influencing supervisors, influencing executives, influencing the decision makers, which there's nothing wrong with that, and I absolutely think that that's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But we won't always have access to those types of professionals, and when we don't, then being really intentional about influencing the individuals or the professionals that we have contact with daily. Like
Mm-hmm.
how can we let them know how we are able to lead? How can we let them know the skills that we have? How can we not prove ourselves, but how can we demonstrate that value that we have to them in a way that will be helpful and beneficial?
Yeah, no, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how often we dim our light in meetings.
Yeah.
There are a lot of times when sometimes if it's virtual, it's easy to be off camera because you just don't, you don't feel like showing up. Or if you're in
Yeah.
a room, you may not feel like you know how to contribute,
Yeah.
right? And I think those are the opportunities where you can demonstrate influence right where you are. and not be the silent voice in the room, because I'm sure there's perspective that you can bring.
Yeah.
There's you can ask a question, but allow your presence to be felt in the environments that you're a part of. I think that's a way to start demonstrating leadership. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
You said, and I really like this because I think people should catch it in case they missed it. You said, allow your, and I may have now messed up the words, allow your presence to be felt
Hmm.
in those environments that you're in. And I think that that's so important because number one, when you're allowing it, you are giving yourself the permission and the ability to share it.
Hmm.
And if someone's going to feel your presence, it requires that you have to step outside of yourself
Hmm.
in order to do that. So I think that that's really good. That's really good right there.
Yeah, and you feel the difference. It's a different energy when you get past that internal conversation, like, don't say nothing, Lavar, and then you challenge it, like, shut up, I'm going to speak this time, right? And as soon as you challenge that internal conversation, you
Yeah.
feel more empowered to show up more
Right.
boldly, and it just carries over to the rest of your day and other areas of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time too. Like the
Hmm.
more we can consistently do it, I think the more it will pay off. Um so if every person watching, whether they're watching live or they watch the replay, if they could do one small thing today or tomorrow to lead early, what would you recommend they do?
Like, where are the areas in your life where you can add value? Like, identify your gifts, your strengths, and find ways to add value with I believe what God has given you. Like, that is how you start to lead. Whether it's, if you're a speaker, share your story. If you're a writer, write that blog. It doesn't need to be a
Yeah.
book, right? But just tap into the areas of your gifting and find ways to solve a problem. There's problems all around us, whether it's within your organization or outside of your organization. Just find ways to start where you are now. I think a lot of times we feel like we need a degree or we need a certification program or we need something outside of ourselves to feel like we are affirmed to now then lead. But you can start, like, you have an experience, you have perspective. You can start where you are right now to create change and to add value.
Yeah, no, that's good. Absolutely agree. I'm all about like how can you add value? Because everyone has it. It's just a matter
Hmm.
of how we can translate that. So my last question before I ask people how they can get in contact with you
Yeah.
is so we focused a lot on the individual professional and how they can learn how to lead early, especially when we're talking about building globally. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So this last question is focused on the organization or the company that they work for, or
Hmm.
maybe even the supervisor. How can organizations do a better job with recognizing and nurturing untitled leaders? So leaders who are professionals who are leading, but not in official capacity,
Hmm.
but they're still leading. How can organizations recognize and nurture those types of professionals?
Yeah, they could, one, poll their staff to see in what ways they want to develop. They can offer coaching opportunities. They can offer leadership development programs. They can offer temporary assignments where, untitled uh, individuals or leaders can gain experience across the organization to learn or develop their technical competency in those areas. So there are a lot of things that I think organizations can do. They just have to be about it. It's not
Yes.
it's not just talking a good game and using the buzzwords, but it's really
Yeah.
investing in the staff. And I see a lot of times, you have more seasoned leaders retire and there's no succession planning, and that knowledge gap gets lost because they
Yeah.
fail to build systems that continue to build up those coming behind them. And so I think just being intentional about how are we building the next generation of leaders, and what are we at a risk as an organization if we fail to do that.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I don't know if you saw the comment from Annette. I can put it back up there. You mentioned great insights, takeaway to tap into your talents. And you know that to that point, Absolutely. Like, you mentioned the survey, you mentioned investing in them, having those conversations with them. It's the things that are obvious but not so obvious.
Hmm.
But as you said, they have to be about it. Like we each have to be about it if we want it to happen. We can't just say, "Oh yeah, this would be something that's absolutely amazing." No, what are the actions that we are taking to not just have the lip service of we want to create new leaders to keep that pipeline going, but actually taking the actions to keep that pipeline going. Um, Lavar, I really appreciate you so much for joining me on this evening, on this Sunday evening, right before the workday on Monday. So much appreciated. And I forgot to mention how we crossed paths because we both worked with Dr. Will.
Hmm.
So, shout out to Dr. Will as well. But
Absolutely.
that allowed us to cross paths and to be able to learn from each other. And we talked about, leadership is not something that you need to do alone, that you have to do alone. And I feel like, with our paths crossing, we had the opportunity to collaborate in several different ways. And so I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what are some of your social media pages or your email? And I'll go back and I'll put it in the comment section. But how can people reach out to you, and what should they reach out to you for?
Absolutely. So lavarthomas.com is my website. If you're looking for coaching or you're looking for a speaker to really help uh, leaders within your organization not only overcome the self-limiting beliefs, but to really tap into what's in them so they can create impact. I would love to, come to your organization. I also published my book, The Other Side of Letting Go, and really it helps um, individuals and organizations really get clear about the things that's keeping them in place and how do they begin to rewrite that story of what's possible. Um, of course, LinkedIn, Lavar Thomas. My Instagram is Empower for Greatness, Facebook Empower for Greatness as well. And so, yeah, those are the platforms that if anyone wants to get in contact with me, they can.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, LeVar. I really appreciate your
Yes,
time
thank you,
today.
Laura, as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, hey, y'all, if y'all just tuning in, I'm sorry, but we are getting ready to log out for the day. However, be sure to catch that replay. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know if you have questions, if you have comments, or whatever the case may be. We want to hear from you and we want to keep this conversation going. Not all leadership comes with a title. So, when you're looking to build your path forward, you got to be curious, you got to be self aware, and you have to be able and willing to have those conversations. And if you're wondering where this all came from, this all came from Lavar. So go back and catch that replay so you can get the details. All right. Y'all have a good one. And remember to stay adding value. Bye, y'all.
So thank you.